The Yellow Wallpaper.
Charlotte Perkins Gilman was born July 3, 1860 in Hartford, Connecticut. She was a writer and social activist in the late 1800s and early 1900s, as well as a feminist and successful lecturer. She had had a difficult childhood as her father had abandoned the family, leaving her mother to raise two children on her own. In 1884, she married an artist, Charles Stetson, to whom she had a daughter they named Catherine. Charlotte suffered from severe depression, which caused her to have to go through a series of unusual treatments. Later, Charlotte remarried her cousin George Gilman a few years before he died of a brain hemorrhage. Not long after being diagnosed with inoperable breast cancer, Charlotte committed suicide on August 7, 1935, overdosing on chloroform. Her suicide note read, "When all usefulness is over, when one is assured of unavoidable and imminent death, it is the simplest of human rights to choose a quick and easy death in place of a slow and horrible one. I have preferred chloroform to cancer." The narrator and her husband John rent out a lovely secluded estate for the summer in the interest of her mental health. John, being a physician, believes she suffers from temporary nervous depression, but that she is not necessarily ill. He makes her rest as much as possible in the room he picked for them based on its size and airiness. The narrator would have preferred one of the smaller, prettier rooms on the ground floor rather than the one John had chosen for them on the second floor, which had at one point been a child's playroom. Although she felt uneasy in the room due to its ghastly yellow wallpaper, she abides by John's wishes. The narrator's detest for the wallpaper after a while turns into fascination, as she is prohibited from doing anything stimulating. Eventually, after observing the obscure pattern, she believes she sees something, a woman trapped behind the pattern. The narrator keeps track of her observations in her writing, unknown to John. He would discourage her doing so, as writing is what her family believes made her sick in the first place. In the evening light, and worst in the moonlight, the pattern appears as bars, and the woman becomes clear, shaking the bars and creeping around her prison. As time moves on, the narrator's delusions escalate. She no longer sees the woman creeping strictly behind the paper, but outside the windows as well, sometimes quickly and other times more slowly. The narrator decides to help the woman escape. With John out of the house for the day, she locks herself in the room and starts tearing off all the wallpaper. When John arrives home, he finds her creeping around the room. She turns to him and says, "I've gotten out in spite of you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the wallpaper so you can't put me back." With that, John faints and the narrator continues to creep around the room. John, a physician and Jane's husband. He is caring but very controlling with Jane, as he refuses to believe that there is anything seriously wrong with her. Jenny. She is John's sister and the one tending to the house. She is enthusiastic about her work but is careful around Jane. Jane, the main character who suffers from depression and delusions. She is often quiet and reserved, usually obeying what her husband John asks of her. The woman in the wallpaper. Jane's id, the true self that fights to break free, which houses the most basic and animalistic impulses. The themes for this short story are freedom, confinement, and the madness that ensues. It is the isolation meant for her very recovery that causes Jane's condition to worsen. As her mind breaks, she becomes completely free from any kind of care or worry. Another theme is the subordination of the female in the marriage. The husband makes all the decisions and treats Jane like a child, calling her a little girl and refusing to listen to her. This short story is written in a first-person point of view, with the writing style similar to journal entries. The writing, as the story progresses, becomes more and more fragmented, showing the deterioration of the narrator's reasonable thoughts and the self-identification with her delusions. This story was set back in the 1800s, when women were viewed inferior to men, and the rest cure was widely practiced. The scenery is a secluded old mansion a few miles out from a village. The outside appears warm and inviting, but being unattended for years, the house has a queer feel to it. Most of the story takes place in the old nursery, its yellow wallpaper continually being described. The mood of this text is eerie, ominous, and foreboding, fitting in with the genre of gothic horror. The conflict in this story is man versus self, as Jane is struggling with her own mind and delusional thoughts. It is also a man versus society conflict, as it is considered to be a metaphoric piece about a woman's behavior and role in a man's supremacist society. Symbols and figurative language. The room. There are scratches on the floor as well as on the walls, and on the bedposts there are bite marks. This foreshadows how Jane will react when she succumbs to the madness. It can also be looked at as an illusion to show that there was others like her there before her, or that she had done the destruction of the room and does not remember doing it. There's also a streak on the wall all around the room except where the bed is, that perfectly matches up to her shoulder, which supports the idea that she has been there before without recollection. The room is a nursery as well, which shows how the narrator is treated like a child. The husband. John's actions of making all the decisions shows the suppressive and condescending nature of the males in that time period, when women were viewed as dainty and in need of protection and guidance. The woman in the wallpaper symbolizes women's societal role. Opinions and beliefs were to be kept unseen and unheard, especially if they had a disability or condition. They were to maintain the appropriate outward appearance in public, their real selves constrained when viewed by others. The moonlight. As the night represents being unobserved and what is kept hidden, the moonlight brings transparency to the inner desires and thoughts. It shows what is under the facade as it made the image of the woman clear through the pattern. Writing style. The narrator's writing style changes throughout the story. We see her mental stability deteriorate, shown through continually shorter and shorter sentences. Irony. There is dramatic irony within the story, which is shown when John says, "Really, dear, you are better," which as readers we know is not true because she becomes more mentally unstable without John recognizing it. Situational irony. The whole story shows this because the family moves houses for a vacation so the narrator can get better, but instead she gets immensely worse than before. The author uses a lot of personification when showing the character's connection to her surroundings, as shown in the quote of Jane reminiscing her old room. "I remember that kindly wink the knob of our big bureau used to have, and there was one chair that always seemed like a strong friend."